Rick and Morty comic issue 13. Rick tells Morty to snap out of it because their lives are in danger, and he says he knew this would happen, and going over to the memory center of the Morty head is like switching from a race car to a hillbilly kid's big wheel. He somehow isn't sure how to steer the spaceship in Morty's head, even though he's still a genius who knows how to steer spaceships, and the instructions on the buttons are really obvious. If this is from the other Morty's memory, wouldn't the buttons just be in gibberish instead, since he wouldn't have known what any of them did? Instead, instructions like sorta left and maybe down are really clear and shouldn't be confusing Rick. He doesn't know how to land the ship just because of that, and somehow says space doesn't have an up and a down, even though he should know that up and down are relative, and the up would obviously be referring to up relative to the spaceship in him. Isn't he supposed to be a genius? Then Rick says he can't fix it either because he doesn't understand how it works, even though it's a spaceship either way, even if the buttons are labeled differently. So because he's forced to be stupid, Morty has to save the day by pressing the obvious home button, which Rick should have tried. He says condescendingly that staying cocky won't get them far, even though he clearly needs Morty's help at this point more than ever. He says after the spaceship lands in the woods that the aliens must have already started their invasion and they've got to find out what they're here for. Considering that, for once, he's dumbing down his dialogue instead of saying Big Hadron Collider, when he always just speaks intelligently regardless, maybe he's not suddenly trying to make Morty understand him better. Maybe he's stupid now specifically because he's in the Morty head, and so his intelligence is limited to what Morty can relate to and perceive. Okay, that's confusing. If anything, you'd think that he would have limitless intelligence, because from the perspective of Morty, he comes off as limitlessly intelligent. They get threatened by alien soldiers from behind and put their arms up. It was sweet of Rick to say, "Don't worry, little buddy, I got a plan." And he says to do what he does, but all he can do is fail a handstand and humiliate himself and get the aliens to laugh at him. Again, if this was really from Morty's perspective, Rick would be able to do literally anything. But this actually just distracts them, as after one of them humanizes himself by saying he's gotta tell his wife about this, they get shot to death by another version of Summer with a badass headband and black stripes in her face. I love when she's portrayed as a badass. It tries to make up for her being a boring, stereotypical, average valley girl. And this time they remember her charm as she immediately gets all excited at seeing Morty, who for some reason looks creeped out and hugs Rick from the side. She hugs him and says that she thought he was dead and she had found Rick's head but not him, and had tried to look for him. So is this really the real Summer? That would be gutsy. I mean, they're in another Morty's head. Was that beginning scene from last issue something that happened in two different universes? Summer says that the aliens came after Rick's funeral and was over in minutes, and all the armies in the world were gone. Rick just snarks that because he blew up an armada by himself, maybe he should rethink where his taxes are going. Rick pays taxes? I guess he has no choice. I guess it's just like him to be so casually arrogant that he belittles the armies for not being as competent as him and the aliens. Summer says that they came to the house and took Jerry, and after a while of them thinking he was dead, they got word from their spies inside that he's alive in the palace. Summer says that she doesn't know why they took him specifically, and most people assume he's a traitor. I guess because they think he must have gone with them voluntarily, because why would they kidnap him? He's got nothing to offer. And him being a traitor would make sense, considering he got Rick and Morty sent to a prison to be self-serving, no problem. Thankfully, Rick lampshades how forced Summer's apocalypse lingo sounds, and it turns out it's been 19 months since the alien invasion. Well, never mind. That plays into the fact that Rick said last issue that the alternate dimension had time go faster than where he's from. So because it's an accelerated timeline, it could make sense that it's already been 19 months. Would it kill the other Beth to wear an eye patch? She was a deadpan snarker to him, and it was sweet of Morty to hug her just from seeing her. And it was sweet of her to just casually hug back while talking to Rick. She says they need her in a council for a final meeting and it'll all be over soon. He calls her sweetie, telling her to go have fun, and suddenly Rick says he has to get Morty to a classroom and teach him everything he knows fast, or else they're all gonna die. I guess it makes sense that because he's so smart, he assumes anybody should be able to be taught what he knows because it's such common sense to him, and it's just child's play. And combine that with the fact that he's desperate and on a deadline, and maybe it kinda makes sense that he convinced himself that this isn't completely hopeless. But from any outsider's perspective, it's a foregone conclusion that Morty won't be able to learn everything Rick knows that he doesn't. Shouldn't it be immediately obvious to someone who constantly brags about his intellect that it'd take forever to try to teach Morty that much? And that's just trying to teach him. That's not even including the time it'd take for a slow learner like him to get the hang of understanding it. Morty, of course, finds it all too complicated, and Rick is mad at him and says it's all so simple. That's relatable. Later, Beth says that their spies have smuggled out a detailed floor plan and security codes, so now they have access to the whole place, and they've lost a lot of people. Rick naturally wants her to hurry up and asks them what their actual goal is. He says amusingly, sure, you get past some doors, but then what, move their furniture around? It's also sweet of him to call her Honey. He usually uses pet names for his daughter. She's badass when she says that her mission is to kill Jerry. Rick says amusingly that he can get behind that plan, and Morty's more relatable as he's just horrified because it's his father. Morty and Rick are like conscience and intelligence. One's logical and one's emotional, and both of them have their good points and bad. They're two halves of the whole. Rick's got a great point, and Morty's understandable too. Beth says that they have proof that Jerry's working with the enemy on a super weapon. I can't say I blame him though, because if you're living in a depressing world under an alien invasion, it makes sense that someone self-serving would want to do anything to make their position in life not completely hopeless and depressing. And it's not like he's got family to motivate him not to, because he gets no respect from his wife and daughter. Rick jokes about how Jerry couldn't possibly be useful, asking if they're gonna kill them with shrinky dinks, and he complains about how realistically no one's in the mood for his joking around. He naturally lampshades how Morty called an alternate universe Jerry his dad, and hopes he can explain photosynthesis to him before their family gets him turned into a fine pink vapor. Why would he think Morty needs to understand photosynthesis? What do plants have to do with this? And if Rick can make literally anything, especially from Morty's perspective, why can't he just make an invention that would let Morty become a fast learner? He never thinks through his inventions enough to realize the negative consequences, or else he wouldn't make them. So it's not like he anticipates that that'd be a disaster waiting to happen because his sidekick would end up too smart for him and get cocky and become like evil Morty, which might have been his origin. So it's not like he's just intentionally keeping him stupid when he could use some magic liquid to make him smart. I think Rick's Achilles heel is biology, including neurobiology. After all, if that wasn't the case, he would have mastered brainwashing by now, and then everything would be way too easy for him. And we've seen plenty of times in the show that he screws up when he tries biological experiments, like involving Morty. Like there's another version of Morty that's permanently turned into a lizard person because his Rick couldn't figure out how to undo it somehow. He's good enough at biology to make clones and age them up really fast, but that has to be about it for the sake of balance. Even then, that screwed up, as the Tiny Rick episode proved. And I don't even know how that was possible. Anyways, Morty, being the conscience of the pair, naturally says he wants to stay here with his family, even though it's not literally his family. And Rick says he'll do it without his help. Morty doesn't want to believe another version of his dad became a traitor. This series really does the multiverse concept way more creatively than Archie Sonic, which just wasted it by ripping off other franchises, like Judge Dredd or Godzilla or Sailor Moon. All you have to do is watch this show to see how interesting a multiverse full of infinite possibilities could have been for Sonic. We could have seen a universe where Antoine was a world dictator. Then we would have known what the stakes were when Patch tried to become the king. Rick finds out Jerry had been using his toaster, and an explosion happens because the aliens have found them. Beth says to evacuate the hospital and get everyone out. So the base was a hospital? Well, that was convenient. It helps heal the rebels and has a lot of room. At first, the art made me assume they were in a high school. I mean, weren't they? Morty was just in a classroom. Then we cut ahead to Rick and Morty being captured in a vehicle with everyone else looking unhappy. As I wonder why the base wasn't destroyed a long time ago. Like, I guess they didn't know that exact building was where the base was. But you'd think they'd have seen the rebels go in there eventually. They kind of need a force field generator. And it was sweet of Morty to apologize to Rick. And it was also nice that Rick said, "It's not your fault, buddy." Morty says that Rick does some amazing stuff, and he feels guilty about being stupid and thinks it's his fault that they're all gonna die. Rick tells him happily to not be so hard on himself because they're bound to die. And then gets an idea saying, "Wait, that's it! You're an idiot!" And Morty makes me smile by simply saying, "That's kinda not cool, Rick." Rick easily slips out of the handcuffs saying that they're gonna be okay and calling him little buddy. and steals an alien's ray gun and kills the aliens all badass, saying, "Thanks, dumbass!" So they won't censor that word. Well, good. Rick explains that the reason nothing works right in Morty's memory center is because Morty doesn't understand how anything works, and because he doesn't, they don't. So everyone's a moron, including the aliens who tried to handcuff them. I guess they're only all morons as long as Rick and Morty are here living through the other Morty's memory. Because if everyone was always a moron up to this point, the rebels wouldn't have survived as long as they did. This is the problem with the story arc, it doesn't even follow its own logic. And now they're up to the point where the other Morty must have died, and Rick's able to make things go his way and break script. It was sweet of Rick to not call Morty an idiot this time, and instead just say that he's great. I love how he goes out of his way to humor and be nice to Morty sometimes. Sometimes he's a sociopath to him, but that's just the comedy of the series, and it's moments like these that show the audience that that's not meant to be taken seriously. He's insensitive and self-absorbed, but at the end of the day, he still loves his grandson. This whole everyone's stupid because they're Morty's memory except for Beth and the rebels thing is a bit confusing, but it's interesting at least, and that's the most important thing for a story to be. Rick presses the palace landing place button, saying all badass like, Now we kick Jerry's stupid ass! As Morty's realistically insecure about his intelligence again, and Rick humorously doesn't notice. I'm glad Rick's finally not having trouble with the spaceship's obvious buttons anymore. It's just weird that the aliens handcuffed the wrong just because it's a memory of Morty's, because if it's his memory, won't that mean that they handcuffed them wrong for real too? I guess when it happened for real, the other Rick never had a reason to come to the conclusion that he could get free of the handcuffs that easily, so the aliens were still idiots. Rick just came to the wrong conclusion. It's cool to see Beth being a badass leader. She tells the escaping shooting rebels to hold the field, ordering a team of them around. And Morty shows compassion, asking if they're going to be okay out there. But shouldn't it even matter if they'll be okay? They're in a memory, not a real universe. They're in a memory of a universe that already got destroyed. Everything around them is just a simulation construct that helps them better understand what's going on, what they're doing. It's not like they travel back in time and are altering the course of that universe's history. Rick says that the scientific laws might be iffy in this universe, and so even Jerry might be able to figure out how his toaster works. But he just said earlier that everyone's an idiot here, even though Beth clearly isn't. So won't Jerry never be able to figure it out? What proof does he have that the laws of science themselves are iffy here? I think Rick's just wrong here. Morty being an idiot has always been an informed flaw. Probably coming from the fact that Rick's a genius, and so he exaggerates how Morty doesn't know as much as him because of his ego. While really it's more like Morty's average intelligence, and only in the sense that he's ignorant, not actually an idiot. Morty's at least smart enough to catch on to how Rick usually is and get sick of him sometimes, which makes him look street smart at least. Rick thinks that the toaster might be their ticket home. Talk about insane troll logic out of context. Rick has to explain to Morty that they can't save this Beth and Summer because they're just in a memory construct. In this reality, Morty is in his lab propping up his pineapple Frogurt. But Rick's talking as if they're still in a memory, even though Rick clearly did something that he thinks was only possible because they're in a stupid head, easily escaping the handcuffs. So this proves it, Rick was just wrong, and the other Rick escaped too, because otherwise they wouldn't still be in a memory reliving what the other Morty went through, because he would have never made it to this point. Also, if it's all just a memory, this universe would only last for as much time as he had left, and would stop once they get to the point where the other Morty and Rick were supposed to die. They find the other Jerry, and he tells Beth not to shoot, and she and Summer destroy the aliens with ray guns. She calls Jerry out, gets hurt, and he says that he was just forced into it, naturally. That's less gutsy than him actually being a traitor as a main character. He says that the aliens thought he knew how it worked, and today was his last chance. And he was told that his family was gone anyways. He says he's glad she's alive, and he had hoped his family would save him. Rick says they have 5 minutes left. Summer says that doesn't make any sense because it's just a toaster he's holding. Then Rick reveals that it was a toaster he modified so it would scan all the toast, ever, to find out the perfect slice. That's so Rick. A mundane, awesome invention. They really think of everything for him. But yeah, it's completely ridiculous that he'd be able to scan all the toast ever successfully when there's apparently infinite universes. That means it'd take an infinite amount of time doing that. He couldn't honestly expect it to ever finish. He should at least say that he's exaggerating. He says that Jerry's stupid fumblings with the machine has caused it to be on a slow burn to overload, which would take them and this universe with it. Why would a machine with only that purpose be capable of destroying its entire universe? That's overpowered for a device only meant to find the perfect toast. Also, Jerry pointed it out in the previous issue, the very idea of a device meant to find the perfect toast is pointless anyways because good taste is subjective. So it's impossible to find the perfect recipe that everyone would agree with. Jerry hated his idea of the perfect toast. This is supposed to be why that other universe ended up destroyed? I can understand if it was an alien doomsday machine that was meant to be activated only for a little bit as a bluff, and then it ran on too long. But this is too accidental. That's some glitch. Rick apologizes to Morty, saying that there's nothing he can do. Morty says that he said that all he had to do is understand. And he says that he understands how selfish Rick is, and puts faith in him to do the impossible. And yet Rick was acting like an idiot earlier. I guess the reason Rick needed encouragement in the first place was because he's more nihilistic than he is egotistical. Because otherwise, you'd think he'd never lose faith that he could make anything and do anything. So thanks to one panel's worth of encouragement from Morty, he immediately realizes they can use the toaster's interdimensional link to hone in on their dimension, as it was already designed to do, and use it as an anchor for the portal gun. But his portal gun is just a memory construct here. That's why he couldn't just beam them home earlier. He needed Rick's head to be connected to an energy source to even have enough energy to get here. Already they've forgotten the rule. This arc is written like Pender's issue of Archie where it turned out Robotnik wasn't vaporized by Eve. I'm actively trying to make an effort to understand the entire time. But at least here it's consistently amusing and at least tries to kind of make actual sense. He says that with the toaster that's built up, he could build a temporal shielding. So, power is in the power overloading in the toaster? And temporal shielding just sounds like gibberish. Nothing's immune to time. Rick's then made to lampshade the minor deus ex machina as he says that there are probably greater forces in the universe at work. It then says uncharacteristically that maybe family and love is a universal constant across the universe. Like Morty's love of toast, or his love for his family. Even though some families are abusive, so no it's not. I guess he's only saying this because this is a part of Morty's memory, and Morty views Rick in a slightly idealized way so that he can handle spending time with them. Rick calls him Little Buddy and makes a functioning portal gun for them to escape. Beth says that wasn't their mission to get out, and that's why they split up, to make the palace fall. Summer is somehow already aware of the fact that the people in here are already gone, and there's another Summer looking for Morty that needs saving. So suddenly she's aware that she's just in a memory? Was that programmed into the AI of the fake Summer made for Rick's recreation of the memory in universe form? That has to be how it's an actual universe, and not just literal electrical synapses in a brain. It's a simulation with solid light holograms. And they think Archie Sonic is too complicated. It was nice of Summer to put her hand on Morty's shoulder at least. And it was also sweet that Rick put his hand on Morty's shoulder, saying, "Sorry, buddy." And they walk into the portal, while the memory constructs just resign themselves to their fate instead of trying to get out of the head. Which I guess Rick programmed them to do at the end of the memory, because otherwise they get in trouble because they come out of the head and have to start whole new lives with the same social security number as their counterpart on Earth. Also, Rick has to have programmed the recreation of the memory universe so that it keeps going on through self-generated coding once Rick makes it past the point where the original Rick and Morty of that universe died. To the toaster, I guess. Because otherwise, they would have just died because the memory would have been forced to progress the same way it did last time, with the toaster destroying everything, because that was part of the other Morty's memory. This still doesn't explain why the other Rick and Morty had their heads remaining when the dimension was destroyed, and nothing else. We aren't told that they and only they tried to get out of the dimension with a portal gun that actually be functional in their universe because it wasn't just a memory construct at the time, and they didn't get out of it fast enough. Somehow. When Rick and Morty escape the memory construct, the head gets destroyed for no apparent reason. Why did it take so long for it to be destroyed by the toaster? Was it on a delay? Did Rick slow down time for it? But he only found out his dimension was destroyed after he already found it. The story's confusing. Rick explains to an unhappy Morty that there really was no way he could have saved them as they were just memories, and he just needed him to believe he could save them so they could get out of there. I guess because Morty had magical power over the universe just because he's a Morty? And that made Rick motivated enough to figure out how they could escape. But he's always been able to make anything. And he's always infinitely smart anyways. I guess because it was a universe in a Morty's head, it was a bit idealized for him. So it made it so that Morty was necessary to motivate Rick to do his best. Did we really need that gore? Seriously? Anyways, Rick awkwardly changes the subject because Morty's naturally upset about what just happened. And when they reunite with their family who just came back from the funeral, they all hug Morty. But Rick just yells at Jerry for messing with his stuff. Okay, so huh? I guess they only buried the Rick head. He runs up to Jerry because the toaster's red thing is flashing and he asks him what he did and says that they need to get this off now. Get what off? The red thing? And then the story ends with the tension racked up as they get threatened by some aliens who are looking for them. As we see some huge metal thing with a door land in front of them that's really hard to describe. So that was a confusing story, but at least it was interesting. Basically, because Rick and Morty were in the memory construct of a Morty head. According to Rick, this was what made it really easy for Rick to slip out of the handcuffs. And this was why he needed Morty to motivate him, so he could build a way to get home from there. All by using his machine meant to find the perfect toast to home in on his own universe. Again, if it's all a universe that's just made out of a memory, how did it continue to function when they got past the point where the other Morty would have died? How is there even a universe actually inside of a head instead of just synapses they could do nothing with? I guess they were in a microverse Rick made inside of the head, and that was what all those wires were for. Wouldn't the other Rick and Morty have been guaranteed to have survived that situation because their portal gun would have worked just fine? Why didn't they survive? How would only their heads? You'd think that if they died going through a portal, they would have been split in half, not... The only reason the comic Rick and Morty couldn't just portal gun out of the doomed universe was because we wanted a longer story arc, and because they were in a mere memory. So apparently everything there works just fine, except the portal gun. Even the spaceship works just fine, complete with magically having more clear instructions when Morty doesn't understand how to pilot it. So much for consistency. That was confusing. At least it was interesting to see Beth and Summer as resistance members against alien invaders for a little bit, because they're both competent and serious. And Jerry was only forced to work for the aliens, which was kind of a twist. Surprisingly, Beth works better this way, because she's not just someone who exists to argue with Jerry, and that's all she does. I guess it makes sense that the perfect toaster locator overloading would have destroyed the universe, because it would require an immense amount of power just to scan that many universes for anything. So if that amount of power overloaded, I guess that would be dangerous. Good thing the portal gun won't ever overload then.